I walked into the boardroom expecting to hear my name announced as the new chief operating officer. Instead, I got the shock of my life. Travis Langford, my boss, stood at the head of the table with a smug smile. "We're making some leadership changes," he said, looking right at me. "Violet, we're letting you go due to leadership realignment." My heart stopped. Letting me go? I'd been with this company for 12 years. I'd saved them $80 million just last quarter. The room went silent. Everyone stared at their hands, avoiding my eyes. "I'd like you to meet Lucas Hartwell," Travis continued, putting his arm around a young man who looked barely 30. "He's our new COO." Lucas gave a nervous wave. I recognized him immediately. Travis's godson. Security appeared at the door. "Miss Hart, we'll need to escort you out," one guard said gently. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. 12 years of loyalty, and this is how it ended. I gathered my dignity and walked out with my head high. Outside in the parking lot, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized but never used. "Mr. Braddock," I said when he answered. "I'm ready." James Braddock's office smelled like leather and old money. He was the majority shareholder, a man in his 70s who rarely got involved in daily operations. But when he asked me to meet him the next morning, I knew something big was happening. "Violet," he said, pouring coffee from an expensive-looking pot. "I've been watching what Travis has been doing to this company. And what he did to you yesterday was the last straw." I sat quietly, unsure where this was going. He continued, "I don't want to offer you a new job somewhere else. I want you to take over this company." My coffee cup rattled against the saucer. "Excuse me?" "Travis has been damaging our reputation with the board. Making deals behind our backs. Playing favorites with his family connections." He leaned forward. "The board needs someone they can trust. Someone with integrity. That's always been you." He pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I've already spoken to 2 board members. Margaret Chen and Robert Walsh are ready to vote Travis out. We just need one more vote to force a change." I stared at him, speechless. Yesterday I was fired. Today I was being offered the chance to run the entire company. "Think about it," he said. "But don't think too long." 1 month earlier, everything had seemed perfect. I just finished presenting my 2-year transformation plan to the executive team. The numbers were incredible: $80 million in savings, 20% efficiency improvements, and the highest employee satisfaction scores in company history. Travis had shaken my hand afterward. "Get ready for the big seat, Violet," he'd said with what I thought was genuine pride. "The board is going to love this. You've earned your place at the top." I'd gone home that night and called my mom to share the good news. I'd even started looking at apartments closer to headquarters, thinking about the longer hours that would come with being COO. But now I realized Travis had been lying to my face. While he was congratulating me in public, he was secretly undermining me with the board. My assistant Sarah had accidentally forwarded me an email last week. The subject line read, "Stalling Violet's promotion strategy." I deleted it immediately, thinking it was a mistake. But now it all made sense. Travis had been planning to push me out from the beginning. He couldn't handle the idea of me outranking him, so he found an excuse to eliminate the competition. The betrayal hurt worse than the firing itself. I spent the weekend building my case, not with emotions or complaints, but with cold, hard facts. I pulled together every project I'd led, every dollar I'd saved, every improvement I'd made to company operations. The numbers told a clear story. Under my leadership, 3 major departments had increased productivity by 30%. Customer satisfaction ratings had reached all-time highs. Employee turnover had dropped to the lowest levels in company history. I documented everything with dates, charts, and testimonials from team leaders. The board wouldn't be swayed by drama or personal grievances. They cared about results, and I had plenty to show them. Monday morning, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I recognized but hadn't seen in years: Dorothy Pierce, a retired board member who'd been my mentor when I first started climbing the corporate ladder. "Violet, dear," her familiar voice said. "I heard what happened. I want you to know I'm rooting for you. And between you and me, I know about Travis's backdoor dealings with the board. Some of us have been watching him for quite some time." Her words gave me hope. If Dorothy was still connected to current board members, maybe I had more support than I realized. "Stay strong," she said before hanging up. Truth has a way of rising to the surface. While I was building my case, Lucas was busy destroying the company's morale. Within his first week as COO, he announced layoffs in the marketing department. The following week, he pushed through vendor deals that made no financial sense, just because they were modern and innovative. My former colleagues started reaching out. First it was text messages asking how I was doing. Then came the phone calls. "Violet, is it true you're starting your own company?" asked Maria from accounting. "Because if you are, I want in." I got similar calls from David in operations, Jennifer in customer service, and even some of the senior managers. They were all frustrated with Lucas's leadership and looking for a way out. "I'm not starting anything new," I told each of them honestly. "But stay tuned. Things might be changing soon." The best part was I didn't have to do anything to make Lucas look bad. He was doing that all by himself. Every decision he made seemed designed to prove that he was completely in over his head. Travis had gambled on loyalty over competence, and that gamble was backfiring spectacularly. The employees who'd respected me for years were now seeing exactly what they'd lost. Within 2 weeks, the company's internal satisfaction scores had dropped by 40%. Braddock arranged a dinner meeting at an upscale restaurant downtown. Just him, me, and 2 board members, Margaret Chen and Robert Walsh. Both had worked with me on various projects over the years. "Violet," Margaret said over appetizers. "We need to talk about the future of this company. Travis's decisions are starting to worry us," Robert nodded. "The Lucas appointment was made without proper board consultation. We're concerned about the direction things are heading." I stayed calm and professional. "I understand your concerns," I said. "If you'd like, I can share some data about recent operational changes and their impact on company performance." For the next hour, I presented facts without attacking anyone personally. I showed them productivity reports, employee feedback scores, and financial projections based on current trends. The numbers spoke for themselves. Margaret leaned back in her chair. "This is exactly the kind of clear-headed analysis we need in leadership." Robert was already convinced. "Violet, you have my support for whatever comes next." By the end of dinner, Braddock had 2 solid votes. We just needed one more board member to flip and we could force a leadership change. "Next week," Braddock said as we left the restaurant, "we make our move." Not everyone on the board was ready to support change. 3 members, Richard Grayson, Patricia Blackwood, and Evelyn Merrow, had been loyal to Travis for years. They'd all benefited from his leadership in various ways. Richard had received discretionary bonuses for advisory services that no one could quite explain. Patricia's consulting firm had landed several unvetted contracts with the company. Evelyn had enjoyed inflated travel perks and luxury accommodations for business development trips. Braddock called each of them separately. I wasn't part of those conversations, but he filled me in afterward. Richard got defensive, he told me over coffee. Patricia tried to change the subject. But Evelyn actually listened. He'd compiled a dossier of questionable decisions made under Travis's leadership. Nothing illegal, but definitely things that would look bad. If they became public, excessive spending on executive perks while regular employees faced budget cuts, vendor contracts awarded without proper bidding processes. I told them change is coming. Whether they like it or not, Braddock said, they can either be part of the solution or they can explain their positions to shareholders. The message was clear: the old ways of doing business were over. It was time for real leadership. How do you think they'll vote? I asked. We'll find out soon enough, he replied. Instead of sitting at home feeling sorry for myself, I decided to raise my profile in the industry. I started attending public events as an independent consultant, networking with other business leaders and sharing my expertise. Within a month, I was invited to sit on a state leadership panel discussing corporate transformation strategies. The invitation came from someone who'd read about my work in a trade publication. The panel went well. I spoke about practical approaches to operational efficiency and employee engagement. Several attendees approached me afterward, asking for my business card and expressing interest in working together. My presence in the industry was growing, while my old company seemed to be disappearing from major event rosters. People were noticing. I started getting invitations to speak at conferences and join professional advisory boards. Meanwhile, back at my former workplace, things were getting worse. I heard through industry contacts that the company had pulled out of several high-profile industry events, citing budget constraints. The contrast was becoming obvious to everyone who mattered. While I was building my reputation as a thought leader, my former employer was becoming increasingly invisible in professional circles. It felt good to know that my career was thriving even after being pushed out. The exodus began 3 weeks after I was fired. First, David Martinez from operations handed in his resignation. Then Jennifer Walsh from customer service. Finally, Michael Tawes, one of the senior managers I'd worked with for years. The Human Resources Department was required to conduct exit interviews with departing employees. What they discovered was shocking. All three cited my absence as their primary reason for leaving. Violet Hart was the reason I stayed with this company for 8 years, David wrote in his exit survey. Her leadership style inspired confidence and loyalty. Without her guidance, I no longer see a future here. Jennifer was even more direct. The decision to let Violet go shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what made this company successful. I refuse to work for an organization that doesn't value real talent. But Michael's response was the most powerful. He attached a 2-page testimonial about my leadership abilities, detailing specific projects where I'd helped him grow professionally and delivered exceptional results for the company. The HR director was required to present these findings to the board at their monthly meeting. When Michael's testimonial was read aloud, several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The message was becoming impossible to ignore. The company was losing its best people because they'd lost confidence in leadership. The quarterly performance report landed like a bomb in the boardroom. Every metric that Lucas controlled showed declining results. Customer satisfaction was down 15%. Employee productivity had dropped 12%. 3 major client accounts were considering switching to competitors. The only bright spots in the entire report were initiatives I'd put in place before being fired. The supply chain optimization program was still delivering savings. The customer service training protocols were maintaining high satisfaction scores in departments that hadn't been reorganized yet. Margaret Chin called me personally to discuss the numbers. Violet, I have to ask, how much of our current success is still built on your foundation? I'd seen the same reports through my industry contacts. Most of it, I admitted. The programs I developed were designed to run for at least 2 years without major modifications. And without you there to maintain them? They'll start breaking down within 6 months, I said honestly. Maybe sooner if leadership keeps making dramatic changes without understanding the underlying systems. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. The board is meeting next week to discuss these results. I think it's time for some serious conversations about the future. After she hung up, I felt a mix of sadness and vindication. I tried to build something lasting, but it was becoming clear that my work couldn't survive without proper leadership. Evelyn Merrow surprised everyone. She'd been one of Travis's strongest supporters for years. But something about the performance reports had changed her mind. She called Braddock directly and asked for a private meeting. He agreed, curious about what she had to say. "I spent the weekend reviewing Violet's entire performance history," she told him. 5 years of consistent results, innovation, team building, cost savings. Then I looked at what's happened in the 3 weeks since she left. Braddock listened carefully as Evelyn outlined her concerns. Lucas was making decisions without consulting department heads. Employee morale was at an all-time low. Major clients were expressing concerns about service quality. "I can't support this anymore," she said firmly. "If we're going to vote on leadership changes, I want Violet Hart as our next CEO." Braddock was stunned. He'd expected Evelyn to hold out until the very end. "Are you sure about this? Travis won't take it well." "Travis should have thought about that before he fired the best executive we've had in decades," Evelyn replied. "I'm voting for competence over politics." When Braddock called to tell me about Evelyn's decision, I felt a surge of hope mixed with disbelief. She really said CEO? Not just COO? Her exact words were, "We're making Violet CEO," he confirmed. Everything was about to change. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. Travis and Lucas were told it was a routine quarterly review. They had no idea what was coming. I wasn't allowed in the room during the initial discussion, but Braddock texted me updates from his phone. "Travis is arguing," his first message read. "Lucas looks confused." The debate went on for 2 hours. Travis presented his case for continuity and stability. He blamed the poor quarterly results on temporary adjustment periods and promised that Lucas just needed more time to find his footing. Margaret Chin wasn't buying it. "We've given this experiment 3 weeks. The results speak for themselves." Robert Walsh agreed. "Our employees are leaving. Our clients are unhappy. We need proven leadership, not more time to learn on the job." When they finally called for a vote, the result was decisive: 5 votes for change, 2 against. Travis and Lucas were out. I was named interim CEO, with a 6-month performance review clause to ensure fairness. Braddock's final text simply said, "It's done. Welcome back, CEO Hart." I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried, not from sadness this time, but from pure relief. Justice had finally been served. Travis didn't take the news well. He stormed out of the boardroom and spent the weekend writing a bitter internal memo announcing his resignation. The memo criticized the board's decision and questioned my qualifications to lead the company. But his real feelings leaked out in conversations with remaining staff. According to several sources, Travis told people he couldn't bear working under the woman he'd tried to erase. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Travis had fired me to prevent me from outranking him. Now I was his boss, and he couldn't handle it. I decided to take the high road. Instead of responding to his attacks, I released a brief public statement thanking Travis for his years of service and wishing him well in his future endeavors. "Leadership transitions are never easy," my statement read. "I'm grateful for the foundation that's been laid, and I look forward to building on our shared successes." Several board members commented on my professionalism. Margaret Chin sent me a note saying, "This is exactly the kind of grace under pressure we need in leadership." Travis left that Friday without saying goodbye to anyone. His bitterness had consumed him completely. But I refused to let it consume me. When they go low, we go high, I reminded myself. Monday morning felt like returning from a long vacation. I walked through the lobby of the building I'd called home for 12 years, and everything looked the same, but felt completely different. My key card worked again. Security guards nodded respectfully as I passed. Several employees stopped what they were doing to watch me walk by, some offering quiet smiles and nods of approval. I could have moved into the traditional CEO office immediately, but I chose not to. Instead, I set up my workspace in a glass conference room on the main floor where everyone could see me. I wanted to be visible and accessible during my first month back. The symbolism wasn't lost on the staff. While Travis had spent most of his time behind closed doors, I was working in full view of the people I was leading. Sarah, my former assistant, practically ran across the building when she heard I was back. "Miss Hart. I can't believe it. I've missed working with you so much." "I've missed it too," I told her honestly. "Are you ready to get back to work?" For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was home. I spent my first week back quietly assessing the damage and planning repairs. No dramatic announcements or sudden changes, just careful evaluation of what needed to be fixed. The most urgent issue was leadership structure. Lucas had made several questionable personnel decisions that needed to be reversed. I didn't fire anyone out of spite, but I did hold people accountable for their performance. The CFO position needed attention. The current CFO hired by Travis had approved several contracts that made no financial sense. I replaced him with Rebecca Martinez, a brilliant financial analyst who'd been overlooked for promotion twice despite outstanding qualifications. Rebecca was exactly what the company needed: sharp, ethical, and completely focused on results rather than politics. Her first week on the job, she uncovered several legacy contracts that were quietly bleeding money from the company budget. These deals were signed without proper oversight, she reported to me privately. "We're talking about hundreds of thousands in unnecessary expenses. How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Based on the signatures and dates, most of these started under Travis's leadership," she said carefully. I thanked her for the thorough analysis and made a mental note to discuss these findings with the board. The quarterly earnings call was my first opportunity to speak directly to investors and analysts about the company's direction. I'd participated in these calls before, but never as the CEO. I spoke with confidence about our strategic priorities and operational improvements. I was honest about recent challenges while expressing optimism about our recovery plan. "We've experienced some leadership transitions that temporarily impacted our performance," I told the analysts. "However, our fundamental business strengths remain intact and we're implementing focused initiatives to restore operational excellence." When analysts asked specific questions about our turnaround strategy, I provided detailed answers backed by concrete data. I outlined a timeline for improvements, explained our employee retention efforts, and discussed new client acquisition targets. The response was overwhelmingly positive. One analyst commented, "This is the most clear and credible leadership presentation we've heard from this company in months." Another said, "The new CEO demonstrates exactly the kind of operational expertise and strategic thinking that investors want to see." Within 48 hours of the earnings call, our stock price began climbing for the first time in months. The market was responding to confidence in leadership. The phone call came on a Wednesday afternoon. Richard Morrison, CEO of Morrison Industries, one of our largest clients, asked to speak with me directly. "Violet, I wanted to let you know personally, we're staying with your company," he said. "We've been considering a switch to your competitors, but hearing that you're back in leadership changes everything." Morrison Industries represented nearly $8 million in annual revenue. Losing them would have been catastrophic, especially during our recovery period. "We've worked with you for years," Richard continued. "You understand our business needs and you've always delivered results. When we heard you'd been let go, we started looking elsewhere. But now that you're CEO, we're confident in our partnership again." I thanked him for his loyalty and promised that his confidence wouldn't be misplaced. After hanging up, I realized something important. I'd never asked anyone to stay loyal to me personally. My leadership had created that loyalty naturally. Other clients began reaching out with similar messages. They weren't staying because of personal relationships or sales pressure, They were staying because they trusted my ability to run the company effectively. That trust was something that couldn't be bought or manufactured. It had to be earned through years of consistent performance. Lucas's story had a quieter ending than his godfather's dramatic exit. Rather than create more controversy, I arranged for him to be transferred to our international office in London, far from the headquarters spotlight. It was a face-saving solution that allowed him to maintain his dignity while removing him from a position he wasn't qualified to handle. The London office needed someone to coordinate administrative operations, a role that better matched his skill level. Lucas never spoke to me directly about the transfer. All communication went through HR representatives. I suspected he was embarrassed about the situation and preferred to avoid confrontation. Before he left, I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I wrote a brief recommendation letter for his personnel file. "Everyone deserves a clean start," I wrote in the letter. Lucas showed enthusiasm for the role and a willingness to learn. With proper training and mentorship, he has the potential to contribute meaningfully to the organization. Several board members questioned my decision to be generous with someone who'd essentially stolen my job, but I believed that holding grudges would only damage my own leadership credibility. Leadership isn't about punishing people, I explained to Margaret Chen. It's about finding ways for everyone to succeed. The industry press eventually noticed what was happening. A business journalist named Patricia Wells wrote a feature article titled, "The CEO They Fired Came Back and Saved the Company." The article detailed my original firing, the company's subsequent struggles, and my return as CEO. It highlighted the dramatic improvement in performance metrics and employee morale since I'd taken over. "Hart's story represents a triumph of competence over politics," Wells wrote. In an era when corporate leadership often prioritizes connections over qualifications, her success demonstrates the power of proven results. When journalists requested interviews, I politely declined. I preferred to let my work speak for itself rather than engage in public relations campaigns. "The numbers tell the story better than I ever could," I told my communications director. "Our focus should be on delivering results, not generating headlines." Several colleagues suggested that media exposure could help build my personal brand and advance my career, but I'd learned something important from this entire experience: real leadership doesn't need constant publicity. The best leaders are often the ones who work quietly in the background, building sustainable success rather than temporary fame. James Braddock visited my office unannounced on a Thursday morning. He'd been traveling for business and wanted to check in on company operations before heading home. "I wanted to see how you're settling into the role," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. We talked for an hour about strategic priorities, financial performance, and employee engagement initiatives. He asked detailed questions about our recovery plan and seemed impressed with the progress we'd made. "You didn't just earn this role, Violet," he said as he prepared to leave. "You earned our trust. The board has complete confidence in your leadership." Then he surprised me with additional news. "I'm updating my estate planning documents this week. I want to name you as the board's lead strategic advisor for all future investment decisions. The appointment would give me significant influence over the company's long-term direction, even beyond my current CEO role." It was an extraordinary vote of confidence from someone whose opinion carried enormous weight with investors. "I'm honored," I told him sincerely. "I won't let you down." "You haven't yet," he replied with a smile. "I don't expect you to start now." The annual shareholders meeting was held in the company's main auditorium. I'd attended these meetings for years as a department head, but this was my first time presenting as CEO. I spoke about our recovery from recent challenges, outlined strategic priorities for the coming year, and answered questions from shareholders about our financial performance and growth prospects. The presentation went smoothly, but what happened afterward was unexpected. As I concluded my remarks and thanked everyone for attending, the entire auditorium erupted in applause. It wasn't polite golf clapping, it was a genuine standing ovation that lasted almost a full minute. Several longtime shareholders approached me afterward to express their support. "We haven't seen this kind of leadership confidence in 15 years, one elderly investor told me. "You've restored our faith in this company's future." Another shareholder said something that particularly moved me. "We came back because you came back. When we heard you were fired, we started selling our shares. When we heard you were named CEO, we bought more." The financial markets had responded to leadership credibility. Investors weren't just supporting the company, they were specifically supporting my leadership. That validation meant more than any salary or bonus ever could. After 6 months of intense focus on company recovery, I finally took my first real vacation in years. I chose a small coastal town where nobody knew my name or cared about corporate leadership. I spent a week reading books on the beach, taking long walks, and eating at small local restaurants. It was exactly the kind of quiet restoration I'd been craving. On my last day, I was having coffee at a seaside cafe when I noticed a young woman at the next table reading a business book. The title caught my attention, Leading from Within, Practical Strategies for Authentic Leadership. I recognized it immediately because I'd co-written it 3 years earlier during my spare time. The book had been published by a small business press and sold modestly, mostly to professional development programs. The woman noticed me looking at the book. "Have you read this?" she asked. "The author has some really interesting ideas about building trust and developing teams." I smiled and told her I was familiar with the author's work. We talked for a few minutes about leadership philosophy before she returned to her reading. It was a small moment, but it reminded me that legacy isn't just about corporate titles or financial success. Sometimes it's about ideas that outlive any individual career. Back at work, I decided to formalize something I'd been doing informally for years, mentoring promising young professionals. I created a structured program that paired senior leaders with junior analysts who showed leadership potential. My first official mentor was Jessica Pierce, a sharp financial analyst who reminded me of myself at that age. She was brilliant with numbers but struggled to speak up in meetings dominated by older, more experienced colleagues. During our first mentoring session, I learned something interesting about Jessica's background. Her aunt was Dorothy Pierce, the retired board member who'd been my mentor when I first started climbing the corporate ladder. "Aunt Dorothy talks about you all the time," Jessica told me. "She says you're the kind of leader she always hoped the company would develop." I was touched by the connection. Dorothy had invested in my development years ago, and now I had the opportunity to invest in her niece's future. Over the following months, I watched Jessica gain confidence and start contributing more actively to strategic discussions. She began leading small projects and presenting her own ideas to senior management. Mentoring her reminded me why I'd fallen in love with leadership in the first place: the opportunity to help others reach their potential. 6 months after returning as CEO, I received an unexpected piece of mail. It was a handwritten note on personal stationery addressed simply to Violet Hart, CEO. The note was brief and unsigned, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Travis. "You earned it," the note said. Nothing more. I sat in my office holding the note for several minutes, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Travis had tried to destroy my career, but ultimately he'd created the opportunity for me to achieve something greater than I'd ever imagined. I tucked the note into my desk drawer and decided not to respond. Some communications are complete in themselves and don't require a reply. That same week, I quietly implemented a new company policy. All executive promotions would now require review by a peer-reviewed panel of department heads and senior managers. No more backroom deals or family connections. The policy wasn't directed at anyone specifically, but it would ensure that future leadership decisions were based on merit rather than politics. "We're building a culture where the best ideas win," I announced at the next staff meeting, regardless of where they come from or who presents them. I'm sitting in my corner office now, looking out at the city skyline and thinking about that phone call 6 months ago, the call that changed everything. When Travis fired me, I could have screamed. I could have argued or begged or threatened legal action. Instead, I walked outside and made a single phone call to someone who understood my value. I didn't get angry, I got strategic. I didn't seek revenge, I saw opportunity. I didn't tear anyone down, I built something better. The company is thriving now. Employee satisfaction scores are at all-time highs. Client retention has improved dramatically. Our stock price has climbed 30% since I became CEO. But the real victory isn't in the numbers, it's in proving that competence eventually wins over politics, that integrity outlasts corruption, that leaders who focus on serving others rather than themselves create lasting success. I think about young professionals who are facing similar challenges right now, being overlooked, undervalued, or pushed aside by people who fear their potential. My advice to them is simple: don't get bitter, get better. Because sometimes the best response to injustice isn't fighting back, it's rising above it and proving your worth through undeniable results. I didn't get even, I got better.